Over the last 100 years, the Middle East and the Arab world in particular has gone through a period of change that's gone so quickly. And it's been shaped by so many forces of their own making and coming from outside their own borders that one generation would not recognize the world that the previous generation had lived in. But I think for the Arab world coming through that with European imperialism and then finally gaining their independence and then coming under the kind of domination of the Soviets and the Americans' policy priorities in the Cold War has shaped the Arab world as a part of the world that was experiencing change at a really rapid rate, but often having to do so negotiating other people's rules. The Arab world has always been really fast to grab on the latest craze in entertainment culture. And so, very early, you have people cutting wax recordings and vinyl recordings of the music of the Arab world. But of course, you had to have a house and a certain amount of money to get a Victrola and to invest in vinyl records. The radio in its first incarnation was also an expensive piece of kit and would be limited to the households of the middle classes, the upper middle classes at that. But what really led to the breakthrough of a mass base for culture was a transistor radio. Pretty much anyone from a humble shepherd watching his herds in the countryside to a high school kid had access to the airwaves. And they seized that opportunity, that access with both hands. Really, in the 1950s and 60s, Cairo was the broadcast center for Arabic radio. And they had a very widely followed radio station called the Voice of the Arab, Saut al-Arab. And Saut al-Arab had two absolute stars that guaranteed them the best listener ratings of any radio broadcast station anywhere in the Arabic-speaking world. They had the charismatic president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser. And Nasser would take to the airwaves to set the agenda for the Arab world. And politically speaking, he did that right from 1954, when he rose from being one of the background players to be president of Egypt, right until his death in 1970. But if anything could eclipse Abdel Nasser, it was Kulthum. And she stands, even today, as the ultimate torch singer of the Arab world, whose ability to move the masses. If you were fortunate enough to get into one of the concert halls to hear her live, or like the rest of the world, who simply had to tune in for those predestined hours when she would seduce the whole of the Arab world with the power of her improvisation, with the richness of her harmony, with the way she manages to jam with a carefully trained orchestra behind her, and the spontaneity that she brought to it. It's Arabic music, but these are all the elements that anybody who loves the jazz vernacular would recognize instantly as what it is that really gives rise to a goddess in your time. There are other huge singers in Arabic musical history, but she stands in a league of her own. And I don't know anyone who would attempt to try and displace her from her throne. I just think that she's iconic in the true sense of the word. If I'm not mistaken, hers was the only funeral that attracted an even larger crowd of mourners than that of Abdel Nasser. I think the question of the Arab world's engagement with jazz is a really interesting one, because I can think of people that I have encountered over the years from the region who love jazz. Ibrahim Malouf leaps to mind, whose father had added a fourth, do we call them valves or keys, to his trumpet to enable him to play the semitones or the microtones that distinguish an Arab chromatic scale from the kind of harmonics of Western music. I can think of certain musical traditions where jazz was brought to Arabic music, most notably in Lebanon in the work of Fairuz, whose son Ziad Rahbani was very heavily influenced by European and American jazz, and was able to enthuse his mother, played a really influential role in composing and producing her work. What binds, I think, the spirit of jazz to the spirit of Arabic music, as I understand it, is this love of virtuosity, the respect for the power of improvisation, the way in which a performer engages with their audience to achieve ecstasy together by what they do in music. I think that these are things which the Arab world, with its own musical tradition, could interact with the jazz world to delight both sides